I got the okay on that tune-up, Joe, so run it back in the stall. Pull the spare and air cleaners and then call me. I got some good service information, and I want you to pass it on to the other fellas on the line.
Fine with me, Dave. I'll get all set up.
Look, you and I know there are just as many different ways to tune up a Corvair engine as there are holes in a head gasket. So let's establish a set way to turn out the best Corvair tune-up and still make it simple. I'll show you what I have in mind. First, let's find out if we've got good compression. Disconnect the spark plug wires and then loosen the plugs. Before you remove them, blow out all plug cavities with compressed air. Disconnect the positive primary wire from the coil and...
Oh, why not just pull the high-tension coil wire?
Well, when the engine is cranked over with the high-tension wire removed, a spark jump leaves carbon tracks on the coil tower. That means trouble later on. Block the choke and throttle valves wide open. Then I'll crank the engine over for you. If you find compression weak in any cylinder, there's no point in going any further with the tune-up. Okay?
Okay.
Now, since compression is good, let's check those plugs. If cleaning will only give a few hundred miles of additional service, it's far better to install new ones. Now that you've got the new plugs installed, I'm glad to see you're using a torque wrench. It's a good habit to get into, especially on Corvairs. We don't want to stretch or pull those aluminum threads in the heads. Okay, let's roll along. Now pull the distributor cap. Some models also have a dust shield. Check that cap and rotor carefully. Look for burned terminals, carbon tracks, or cracks, both on the inside and out. While we're at it, Joe, turn the rotor clockwise as far as possible without forcing the parts, and then release it. The centrifugal advance spring should return the cam to full retard without binding. If the advance assembly binds, pull the breaker plate. Make sure the advance unit is free of rust or dirt. Clean the cam lobes, too.
Oh, what about oiling the advance mechanism?
I wouldn't, Joe. Lubrication builds up a film of dirt. It's better to keep those parts dry. Now look at the distributor point contacts for signs of pitting, roughness, and color condition. If the points are only dirty or gray-looking, clean with a point file. Never try to dress the points until they're smooth.
Dave, these points are too far gone to try to save. I better pull them. They're badly burned.
Yeah, they sure are. And before I forget, points with only minor pitting and also misaligned should never be realigned. Better to replace them so the job stands up. Lubricate the cam surfaces with Delco Remy cam and ball bearing lube or its equivalent. Then if the distributor has a cam wick, rotate it 1/2 a turn. Okay, now install the new points. After you set the point gap to specs, Joe, kick the engine over a few times to close the points and check their alignment. If necessary, bend only the fixed contact support. Now, those look good, Joe. Now that you've got all distributor parts installed, press all plug wires tightly into the cap towers. If you find any loose, check the socket. If badly burned, replace the cap.
All wires tight, Dave. Now what's next?
Well, now that we've worked the ignition system over, remove the sintered bronze fuel strainers at each carburetor. Clean by blowing compressed air through the filter opposite to the flow of fuel, and then reinstall. Also, tighten both carburetor hold-down nuts. And one other thing. If you ever get an owner complaint of poor high-speed performance, check both fuel pump volume and pressure. We won't go into that now, but when you have a few minutes, review page 7-11 in the 1961 Corvair shop manual. And now let's service the battery. Notice that dirt and acid film on top of the cells and on the cables? You better clean it off with a solution of soda or a dilute of ammonia. Check tightness of hold-down hooks and all battery connections. And before I forget, oil that felt washer and check water level in the cells. Now for the blower belt. Well, that belt's okay. But if you find one that's cracked or frayed, don't fool with it, Joe. Install a new one. Use our strand tension gauge and adjust old belts to 55 pounds, new belts to 75 pounds. Plus or minus 5 pounds is allowable. And, Joe, let's look at a 1964 model with blower belt guides. Use a 1/16 shim while adjusting the belt to maintain clearance at the rear guide, and also use the same shim to check and adjust clearance at the front guide.
Okay, Dave. Now where do we go from here?
Well, now let's check the mechanical adjustments of both carburetors. First, disconnect the accelerator rod swivel at the cross shaft lever and reconnect the pullback spring to the swivel hole. Also, disconnect both choke rods at the choke shaft levers. Disconnect the throttle rod from the cross shaft lever on the right carburetor and back off both carburetor idle speed screws at least 2 1/2 turns. Now, take this strip of paper, it's about 1/4 inch wide and 8 inches long, and insert it between the idle speed screw and the throttle shaft lever on the left carburetor. Both carburetors must be off the fast idle cam. Turn the screw down until you feel a firm drag on the paper. Then, turn the idle speed screw clockwise exactly 1 1/2 turns more. This will give an initial idle speed of 500 to 600 RPM.
Why not use feeler stock, Dave?
Well, all other carburetor settings are based on this important adjustment, so it's got to be right on the nose. Paper gives you a more sensitive feel. Reconnect the throttle rod on the right carburetor and disconnect the throttle rod from the left carburetor. Now, using the paper strip, repeat the idle speed screw adjustment on the right carburetor in exactly the same way.